But if you have a child in Brazil, like you go there, give birth, there's some excellent hospitals in São Paulo, in Rio, in Florianopolis, capital of my state. Excellent hospitals, you can give birth there relatively cheaply at a private hospital. The kid is immediately Brazilian, and then you as the parent can apply for permanent residency on day one due to family reunification. And as a parent, then you only need 1 year living in Brazil to apply for citizenship. So we cut that 6-year time frame into a 1 year time frame for you to apply just because you gave birth there.
You just mentioned, have we got a particular, series of things we want to talk about? And the answer is no. And I'll tell you why. Because basically you're kind of like a bit of a poster child for the Free Cities sort of arena, because all the things you do are very on point for Free Cities. Yep. In one sense, and I'm just going to list a few of them here so everyone listening can get a sense. So obviously you're a digi-nomad, obviously. Has to be true. You, correct me if I'm wrong, you work for the Adrianople group. Is that
Not
right?
anymore. Nowadays, my main focus is Settee and Staatenlos, the franchise that was sponsoring the event, on doing residency, citizenships, tax optimization, banking, offshoring. But I did work with the Adrianople group for a while. Back then, we did the open zone map. Where there was the mapping of basically every special economic zone in the world, which was also a really cool project. I wasn't the lead there, but I did contribute, especially in helping revise the Brazilian part of the data. So that was pretty nice.
Okay.
So we can talk about Brazil special economic zones too, although my main focus now is more on the residency citizenship side of things.
The point is, you used to work at an economic zone place. You're a digital nomad, massively into flag theory. Settee is a company that helps you find second citizenships.
Basically.
And same with... Same with Staatenlos.
They're basically the same franchise, just one is like the German-speaking branch of it, and the other is the Portuguese-speaking branch of it.
Okay. And actually, your talk here at, one of your talks here at Liberty in Our Lifetime, which is pretty self-explanatory, was how to become a perpetual traveller, which is also quite interesting. I'm sure there's a number of people out there that would like to know how to become a perpetual traveller. How long have you been travelling, just out of interest?
Perpetual travel, you mean like no fixed place of residence since 2021. It's been a while now, like 3 years.
Was that a COVID thing? A lot of people sort of up sticks after 2020 and started looking around the world,
It was during COVID, but it wasn't because of COVID. So basically back then I was partnering with Christoph Heuermann from Staatenlos, who does this big German franchise for perpetual traveling, digital nomadism, residency, and so on. And I had approached him because he's a fellow Free Cities ambassador, right? I'm also a Free Cities Foundation ambassador. And I had noticed that he already had a franchise in German and in English and in Spanish and in French and in Russian, but none in Portuguese. And I'm a Brazilian, and there's basically every Brazilian either wants to move away from Brazil or they at least want to have their money abroad, right? They don't want to be fully dependent on Brazil because, now just this year we had, 18% devaluation to the dollar. So Brazilians 18%. Are acutely aware of the need to internationalize.
18% inflation.
Yeah, beginning of the year it was 5-1 to the dollar. Now it's 5.8. So it has lost a lot of value. And so I talked to him why you ever considered doing something like this in Portuguese? There's 200 million Brazilians. That's a big clientele you can possibly get. And he said, he already thought about it, but he never found someone reliable, someone he trusted to work on this with. So, let's work on that. Let's team up. So I decided, okay, let's do this. Back then I was living in Austria. I was doing my master's in business informatics. I was 1 year into the master's. And so I was looking into how to really do this. I wanted to have a real company. And then looking at the tax situation in Austria, if I had GmbH, which is the standard corporate method there, you pay 25% tax on the profits. And then when you distribute the dividends, you pay another 27.5 at the personal level. So at that point, I was making zero cash, but already supposed to pay 47.5 for everything I take out. I was whoa, wait a second. So I decided, you know what? I'll just become a nomad, right? I'll file my tax exit with Austria. They call it in the German-speaking countries, it's the Abmeldung, which is a relatively simple process compared to what other countries do. I did my Abmeldung, and I went to Portugal, spent like 4 months in Portugal in a beautiful Cascais area. The people who go to Portugal probably know it. It's in the metro area of Lisbon, beautiful place. And I really enjoyed it and have been like this ever since, right? I've changed my travel patterns a good deal ever since I began. But yeah, that was the main incentive, right? I basically freezed my master's and decided, okay, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to try to build a company for real and see how it works.
And presumably because your company, I mean, does it advise people to be perpetual travelers, or is it more about moving and staying somewhere?
Depends on what they want, right? It's really about what the client is looking for. Usually I see that when it's a younger profile, when it's a person that has remote income already, let's say they're a programmer, they do drop shipping, they have a digital business of any sort, they're a designer, whatever. If they have remote income and they're relatively young, they're usually more open to the idea, they're more interested in the idea. And, the ones that already have kids, maybe they're 40 plus, they usually just want to move to a fixed location because they don't want to have the hassle of it. But this is the medium, like the average. This is not a prescriptive thing, right? We already had younger clients like 18 who, I feel that I'm an older person. I just want to have a fixed place where I can rest and work and do my things. And we also had families with 2 kids who decided to do nomadism. So you can really find a bit of everything, but that's usually the pattern. And one thing that I actually like to recommend and advise to people that have a remote income, and if you're listening to this, you may want to consider this for yourself. A lot of people, they're researching potential countries for residency and so on, and they're doing most of the research from the internet. And then maybe they go visit for a few days to then make a final decision. And okay, this is one way to do research. But if you have the possibility, I really recommend that you spend a month in that country before you make any decision about relocation. So if you have a remote income and you're able to afford that, you can keep working keep earning your income and spend a month in 2-3 countries that you're considering. That will give you a completely different view than I'm here for 5 days. I'm kind of on tourist mode, right? I still am enchanted by the city, maybe. It's the first impression. But you really only get to how it feels like to live in a country when you actually have to spend at least a month there. Because then you see how your routine is going to be like, how it is to register at the gym, or how you're going to do your grocery shopping, and how you get around. That's a completely different feel. So I recommend what is called, let's say, a tactical nomadism, right? It's maybe you're not going to be like that for a long time, but you're going to be a nomad for 3 months or 4 months, and you're going to pick out 2-3 countries that you want to check, and then you spend some time there, see which one you like after living there a while, and then you make your decision.
What I find quite interesting is that on one hand you say Brazilians can't wait to get out of Brazil, and then on the other hand, one of your talks this year was how to get a second passport in Latin America.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's going on here is we all want to go there and they all want to come here. Who's right? Who's right?
I would say both, right? My Brazilian clients, they're doing a lot of Paraguay and Uruguay and these tax havens now, it's getting more popular. But still, the biggest migration destinations for the Brazilians is the US and Europe, and mostly Western Europe. Right, that's what they grew up listening and reading about, and that's what most of them are interested in. And then you have the Europeans and the North Americans who are now going all to Latin America and the Mediterranean and so on. So it's a sense of the grass is always greener on the other side. But then it's also, I guess, a sense of where you're coming from. So the European who is moving to a place like Paraguay or Argentina, he's very rarely moving there to earn an Argentinian salary. Right, they're earning a remote income, and then when they can do this arbitrage, they go to a country where they still keep their European salary, their European incomes, but they're living in a country with half the taxes or even zero taxes, and then half the cost of living for the European. It makes a lot of sense. But then let's say you're a Brazilian, and you earn maybe a smaller salary, and then you're looking to have a local salary in the country you're moving to, then it also makes a lot of sense to move to Europe. Because let's say if you're middle lower class in Brazil and in Europe, in Europe, even as a person who's earning, let's say, less than an average middle class person earns, you're still going to have better safety, better infrastructure, better public transportation to get to work. So it can make sense in both sides, depending on what your current situation is. And then there's also the case where I also know a lot of Brazilian clients and also other Latin American clients, Colombians and Argentinians, so on, that they don't want to leave, right? A lot of my clients, the ones that work remotely from Brazil, like with local Brazilian companies, even if they earn quite well, let's say like $5,000, $10,000 a month for a programmer, they're usually only paying like 5 to 15% in taxes in Brazil because they use local companies in Simples Nacional and the other regimes we have. So when they find out, they're like, oh yeah, I want to move to Portugal, and wait, what? I'm going to pay like 28, 30? I'm going to go to Spain, I'm going to like double my tax burden? A lot of them don't want to do that. So a lot of Brazilians are very comfortable just sticking in Brazil. Now, then there's the other matters that, at least in Brazil currently, we have a left-wing government that is, looking to raise a lot of taxes and is also doing a lot of authoritarian things. A lot of you saw that, they banned Twitter like prior to our elections, and then they put it back on. But
they put it back on, haven't they?
They put it back on. Like a few days after the elections were over, like our municipal elections, they put it back on, which is very suspicious. But so it really depends. I think it makes sense for the European who wants to go to Latin America. I think it can also make sense for the Latin American that wants to go to Europe. And then there's also the two sides that just want to stay in their own continent because it also makes sense for them. It depends on what's your income situation, what you're looking to achieve, what lifestyle you want to have. All of these have to be taken into account.
Have you noticed at all that Brazilians, when they arrive in Western Europe, suddenly discover that it's not what they thought it was?
There is a big factor like that, especially in Portugal. Because Portugal tends to be the place where the Brazilians that are the least prepared go to. Nothing, it's not the fault of Portugal, let's say. It's mostly just because, the Brazilian that doesn't really know English or Spanish or any other language, then they're mostly just looking at Portugal. So there are people that are, usually the least qualified and least prepared. I'm not saying that qualified people don't go to Portugal. They're saying the ones that are least qualified, usually they pick Portugal in Europe. And then they get to Portugal, they figured out that, my rent doubled, but my, the income isn't exactly the best in Portugal either. So there's a lot of cases of Brazilians that will go to Portugal and then after 6 months, a year, they come back disappointed, it wasn't really all that I was expecting. But that's usually a matter of not being prepared enough and not knowing what you're getting into, right? With proper preparation, we've had clients that are very happy living long-term in other places like Italy, like Hungary, like Spain. So
what are the main things? I mean, let's talk about Brazil to Europe first, and then we'll talk about going back the other way. But what are the main things that you have to provide or help people with coming that way? You don't get them jobs and things like that. It's it's just logistical stuff, passports, visas, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so actually we have a partnership with a firm who does this kind of career consulting to help the person prepare for the European job market if that's what they want, right? So, structuring their LinkedIn and knowing how European hiring practice usually work and how you should act in a European job interview. So we actually have partnerships like that to help people who want to get a job in Europe. But usually when we're helping the client, they already either have a job offer or they already work remotely, right? They're already earning their income somehow. So then our side is helping them select a country, select the proper visa for their situation. Sometimes there's multiple options. Evaluating the tax regimes and which one will make most sense for their situation. And then down the line, after the person already had residency for a while, then maybe applying for a passport. And then also, connecting them with local accountants and real estate brokers so to make that transition more seamless. Because there are countries where you have multiple ways, in which you can optimize your taxes, right? So let's say the person is moving from Brazil to Spain. In Spain, if you go to the Canaries, then if you're an entrepreneur, they have the RIC regime, where if you like reinvest in the Canaries, then you can have a lower corporate tax rate. But then they also have the ZEC special tax regime, which is the economic zone in the Canaries, that if you hire 3 or 5 people there, then there's also an even lower corporate tax rate where you pay 4% corporate tax. But then if you're an employee or a director of a Spanish company, even in the mainland, then you have the Impatriate law, which is also called the Beckham law. Then for 5 years, you pay no tax on foreign sourced incomes, and you have like a lower personal income tax rate. Or if you're doing physical work from abroad, right? If you're traveling a lot for work, if you're physically doing work in other countries, then there's the 6P exemption in Spain also, which exempts up to like 60,000 euros of yearly income. Then, but then if you move to, let's say, Melilla or Ceuta, which is in Morocco, then you also have half the personal income tax rate for some years. So like there's 4 or 5 different ways, let's say, in which you could try to optimize your taxes in Spain. And then it's a matter of seeing like, okay, would this person qualify for one of these? Would they be willing to move to one of the places in Spain that would provide one of these regimes, or would they want to move to the mainland? And then within the mainland, like, what would you qualify for? So basically, our job is like analyzing the person's situation to then figure out which countries would make the most sense for them, where they could qualify for the best regimes and then have overall the best quality of life and the lowest tax burden possible.
You mentioned Morocco then. I never thought of Morocco as being...
not Morocco, the country, but I mean like Ceuta and Melilla, the 2 enclaves of Spain in northern Africa, which is like by Morocco, let's say. Like it's still Spain legally, but it's surrounded by Morocco.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
What are they? Islands? No.
They're not islands. They're like pieces of land. Like it's 2 cities in North Africa, and they're completely surrounded by Morocco, and they have special tax benefits to the Spanians that
Oh right,
that move
but
there.
not part. They're not Spanish territory.
They are Spanish territory.
How did I get to 52 years old and not know that? I've been there. I've sailed all around there in a boat and been across the. That's bizarre. Wow.
Ceuta and Melilla, look it up.
I will. What about Morocco and places like that though? They're not. I mean, you get people travel there, right? And they do work from places like that, but they're not really.
There is a huge difference between the countries that maybe are attractive to nomads who are working and traveling, and then the countries that people want to relocate to, right? In the Arab world, it's like 98% of the demand is the UAE, and that's it, right? Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and that's all. I didn't have a single client of mine in 3 years that wanted to actually move to Morocco. And nothing against Morocco. I actually spent 3 months there. I really like the country, but that's not what a South American or even an European is mostly looking for, right? It's usually something that is closer to your home culture, or if it's not directly closer to your home culture, that it's multicultural enough and will give you other benefits to relocate, like Dubai in this case. But yeah, like Morocco doesn't really, it's not really our main seller, let's say.
What's the and try to sort of edit out Portugal in this scheme. But what are the most, because it's got the language thing.
Yeah.
What are the best places in your mind in Western Europe at the moment for people who want to relocate sort of for the longer term?
For people in general, so
well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, people in general. That's why I said don't say don't say Portugal. Well, you can say, all right, let's just say people in general, not Portuguese speakers, any speakers. Let's say English speakers, because I'm an English speaker. I'm asking for myself, obviously.
Of course. So here it depends also on what the end goal is, right? So let's say if the person wants to move to Western Europe and have a lower tax burden, or they want to have maybe they already, like they're Americans, they're going to really pay taxes anyway, or they're looking for a citizenship. So for example, Portugal would be, I would say, the best option in terms of citizenship if the person is not a Latin American, because that's 5 years of residency, and then you can go right away to apply for citizenship, because they already count the time from your temporary residency towards the time you have for citizenship, which is different from most European countries, which is, okay, first you have the temporary residency, then you have the permanent residency, and you only start counting time to citizenship from the time of the PR. Let's say like Poland, right, where you have like 5 years of PR, but before that you still have temporary residency. Now, if we're looking at a tax perspective, for example, then Malta, for example, can be a very interesting jurisdiction. Switzerland, depending on your level of income, even Italy or Spain, if you're able to qualify for one of their special tax regimes. But of course, it's not everyone who qualifies. I've had some people that said Andorra is a beautiful, beautiful country and that they wouldn't mind living there. But then, of course, it really depends on your profile. It's like 30,000 people total. So not everyone is willing to relocate to a smaller jurisdiction. But yeah, I would say these are some of the best. Within the EU context, Cyprus is like the undisputed best tax residency long-term because they have like the complete exemption for dividends and capital gains of most sorts and interest for 17 years when you relocate there. So that's not Western Europe, but, Mediterranean, still good quality of life, lots of English speakers, probably a bit on the more calm, tranquil side than a place like, I don't know, Dubai or Paris or Barcelona where there's a lot of activity going on. But that's a good one as well.
But Western Europe is still kind of hot on the list because most Europeans that I know at least think of Western Europe and Europe being quite regressive in terms of tax, cap gains, this kind of thing. They don't appear to be trying to be as competitive as a lot of places, especially the EU countries, of course, because they're almost bound by regulation not to be competitive as well, right?
Yes, most of them are going in a bad direction, actually, right? So Portugal famously ended their non-habitual resident regime, which gave you tax exemptions for 10 years. Then they created like a version 2.0 of it, which is much more restrictive. Way less people can qualify. And they're even looking to extinguish that. Italy was also proposing those big capital gains taxes on crypto. Overall, I don't think Western Europe in general is trending to a good direction, and it's even funny when you try to compare, right? Because even when you qualify for one of these special tax regimes in Europe, the amount of work that you have to put on it to pay less taxes is a completely different matter from, let's say, like UAE or Latin America or Southeast Asia, the tax havens over there, right? Like, for example, the Spanish Patriot regime, right? So you actually have to be either employed by a Spanish company or you have to be a director of a Spanish company of which you don't own more than 24% of the shares. So you can't just like open a company, have all of it, and then apply for the regime. And then you can't have lived in Spain for the last 5 or 10 years to be able to qualify for it. And then the regime lasts for 5 years. And you're exempt from foreign incomes, but only of passive incomes, not active incomes, and not from the ones coming from blacklisted tax havens, only from incomes. So, they add a lot of ifs and ifs and ifs and buts, whereas in a country like Panama or Paraguay, all of your foreign income is tax-free, and you don't have to declare it. That's all, right? And there's no time cap. There's no you can't have lived here or you have to, jump through 4 hoops and then make 2 backflips and then, slide down. You don't have to think about all of these conditionals that the European tax regimes have.
What about Southeast Asia then? You just mentioned. What are the hotspots in Southeast Asia for this kind of stuff? Yeah,
so I personally haven't been to Southeast Asia, right? We work with local lawyers and accountants, and part of our team actually spends a lot of time in Southeast Asia. I'm more focusing on the LATAM side, but basically you have a number of countries in Southeast Asia that have territorial tax regimes, right? So Malaysia, Philippines, if you're a non-resident. So these countries, they don't tax for foreign sourced income. Thailand famously also had a regime like this with a bit of a twist, but they ended it this year. So from now on, Thailand is actually taxing global income. But for a long time, it didn't, right? As long as you kept the income outside of Thailand.
Is that a trend, the taxing of global income, do you think? Is there anywhere where it's being rolled back, for example?
I don't see it. That's the thing, right? There's a lot of things that once they're done, it's extremely hard to undo. So when a country goes from a territorial tax regime to a worldwide tax regime, future tax reforms are usually going to be in the direction of, we're going to lower the income taxes, or we're going to increase the bracket so it takes longer for you to pay tax on that, but they're not coming back to a full territorial tax. And that's the direction most countries are going, and even some of the still tax havens are going. So you can take the example of Uruguay, right? They over time, they've increased the number of restrictions on the territorial tax regime. They still have a territorial, mostly territorial tax regime. So, for example, rent, pensions, capital gains from abroad are not taxed, but then dividends and interest are actually taxed even if they're from abroad. Although if you move there as an expat, then you have an 11-year tax holiday where you pay nothing, but then you actually have to pay. So it's territorial for some sorts of income, but not others. And then on the company side, they're always also doing something like that, where you really have to show the origin of the income, if it wasn't from work done in Uruguay, because if so, then it's actually local income. So they're basically chipping away at the territoriality principle by adding more and more conditions to it. So yeah, I think that's a big
is anywhere rolling it back. Is there anywhere around the world that is using territorial tax to be competitive? So kind of going from global tax to territorial tax, say, for example.
I can tell you of an example. Usually the countries, what they do when they want to put then some more, a better tax situation, then they create a special regime or they create a tax holiday, right? So hey, you come here and then if you enter through this visa, then you're not going to pay any foreign tax. Or if you, are a foreigner, then you're going to have a tax holiday for 10 years or 11 years. Dominican Republic, for example, they have this territorial tax regime only for a year or two usually. But if you enter through an investor visa or a retiree visa or a rentista visa, then you can actually keep the territorial tax for life. So countries that maybe used to be fully territorial, they kind of cut down on it, but then they allow it for a certain segment, usually just foreigners or foreigners that qualify under particular visa categories. Or maybe the country creates a special economic zone to try to do the same for the businesses, right? So regular businesses, they're still going to pay tax. And then maybe if you're only exporting, then we can give you a tax break, which is what a lot of non-EU countries do, because the EU ones are kind of handcuffed to try to do something like that.
What's your view on El Salvador then in general and as a place to move to?
I am very excited about El Salvador. I think that they're doing great things there. I think they're going to grow a lot and there's a lot of potential. That said, my experience so far is that it's a bit similar to what happened with the Honduras Zettees, that a lot of people are cheering. They're on the sidelines wishing the best of luck and success, but they don't really want to move, at least not at this point, right? Maybe it's because it's too recent. People are not fully convinced that this will last long term. I don't know what happens when Bukele leaves power, this kind of thing. Or just because these incentives are not enough to get people to move, right? The country is not attractive enough on a social level, on a city level, on a connectivity level, on a lifestyle that the people want to live level. So far, there's a lot of people that are interested in it, a lot of people that ask questions about it, hey, how is it looking like? But the ones that actually decide, okay, let's get started, let's do the residency, very few.
And what about Argentina? There's another place that's kind of going through a lot of changes at the moment. I presume there's opportunities for expats there and for people to move down there.
Yes, there are a lot of opportunities. I think that Argentina is going to see, if Milei is able to keep on power and keep doing what he's doing, it's already growing. For this year, I think the projected GDP growth is 5%, which is about double of Brazil. So, it took only a year to be able to start bringing real economic progress. That is one that I think is different from El Salvador, because people actually want to move to Argentina, right? Argentina is a country that is actually, Buenos Aires is a world-class city, right? Is a city that naturally people would already be attracted to. A lot were scared away from it because of the taxes, because of the regulations. But that is a country that if you take away the taxes and the regulations, then the underlying city there is already, a top 3 LATAM city that people organically want to be there. So you already see, if you go to Nomad List, which is a tracker of where most nomads are staying, Buenos Aires hasn't left the top 10 every time I checked for the last year, right? And when I was there, just as Milei was winning, it was already, quite popular. There were many Bitcoiners, there were many, expats and nomads and libertarians. There's a big libertarian scene over there. So I think that's one that will really, really happen. And I've already been doing a lot of Argentina residencies, and the citizenship situation is also something that can make Argentina attractive, right? I talked about this in my talk. They're one of the 3 countries in the world, the other 2 being Peru and Dominican Republic, where you can apply for citizenship in just 2 years of residency. And if you have a local Argentinian child, right, if you give birth there, or if you marry an Argentinian, you can actually apply immediately. You don't even have to wait the 2 years. And then if you compare that passport to Dominican Republic, for example, it's a landslide, right? Argentina is a much better document.
What? That's not is that an actual passport, not or a residency?
You can get the residency, like you're going to have to get the
2
residency
years.
first, and then after 2 years of residency, you can apply for the citizenship. And then once you're naturalized, once you have the citizenship, which currently is taking about 1.5 years, then you'll be an Argentinian national, and then you can get an Argentinian passport.
All right, let's talk about that then. Your talk was second citizenships in Latin America. What are the best second citizenships, according to you, for anyone?
I would say the top 3 are Brazil, Chile, and Argentina.
That's ironic, isn't it? It's Brazil. And all these people want to leave Brazil, and you're like...
I don't find it ironic, because a lot of people want to leave Germany, for example, and they love the German passport, right? Like, Germany is a really good passport, but they don't want to live in Germany, but they're very glad to have that passport, because it takes them everywhere in the world.
Why is the Brazil passport good then?
So first of all, it's a very good travel document, right? I can go to the EU. I can go to basically all of Latin America. I can go to most of Africa, Southeast Asia. I can go to the UK. I can go to Russia, right? There's not like that many passports that offer this level of freedom. I think Brazil is currently ranked like 21st in the world in terms of visa travel freedom. And then Brazil is also a member of 2 important blocs that give additional mobility benefits. Number 1, Brazil is a founding member of the Mercosur. And the Mercosur immigration treaty, like it's basically this economic bloc in South America, that if you're a national of one of the countries that are member of the immigration treaty, then you can request residency in any of the other countries just by showing your birth or naturalization certificate and your proof of no criminal record. And so, like, if I want to, as a Brazilian, to move to Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, or Colombia, that's all I have to show. And I don't even need to translate my documents because they accept the originals in Portuguese. I just need to apostille them. So instead of having to buy a property, found a business, show that I have income, show that I have a job offer, show that I have professional qualifications, I just straight up go and move. And then I also have a work permit because Mercosur members are able to work in any of the countries with like no impediment. I'm able to study like without any like citizenship-based discrimination or anything. And I even have a faster time frame to permanent residency or citizenship. So let's say, for example, in Colombia, that's where I'm spending most of my time nowadays. If you were to get residency there as a non-Southern American citizen, it will take you 5 years of residency to get to permanent residency. As a Mercosur citizen, it only takes me 2 years. So like I got a number of benefits. Like what I said in the talk, and I like to repeat this, is like when you get a passport, let's say in Mexico or Panama, in one of these other countries that are not a member of Mercosur, then you get a plan B, right? You have one country where you're a citizen of, you can move to, you have like the full rights. With a Mercosur citizenship, I get a plan B, C, D, E, F, G all at once. Kind of like an EU passport. Of course, Mercosur is not as integrated as the EU is, but on the mobility side, you know, I do get that. And Brazil is not only a member of Mercosur, but it's also a member of the CPLP, which is the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, right? And this includes then Portugal, again, Cape Verde, Angola, Mozambique, São Tome, Equatorial Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and East Timor. And then in all of these countries, I also have a facilitated entry because I'm Brazilian. There was basically an agreement of the CPLP that was signed like 2 years ago that all the CPLP countries would create also a CPLP visa and residency. Now, this hasn't been uniformly implemented like in all of these countries to the same degree already, but Portugal already implemented, like in the first month that they released that CPLP residency, over 200,000 Brazilians applied and got it. So like then as a Brazilian, just with the Brazilian passport, if I want to relocate, I can do it to anywhere in South America, and I can also quite easily do it in any of the Portuguese speaking countries. So that gives me a diversification of like 20 countries I could move to without needing all of the other paperwork.
Before we go on to the other two places you mentioned, when you're talking about a second passport, say, use me as an example, say I'm a UK citizen, I get a second passport. What are the main, other than what you've just described then, what are the main other reasons why I have that passport? And I'm thinking about things like, during the pandemic when they were locking places down, do I have an advantage there by having a Brazilian passport? Like, for example, when I leave the UK, would I show my Brazilian passport or something like that? I'm trying to understand, how it would fit into my life, because it's all about a plan B. I get that. You need a second passport as a plan B. And, but during the pandemic, for example, we left the UK because we weren't happy with the way the UK was behaving. And we went to Mexico and we stayed there for 4 months, and and then we went to El Salvador, and then we went to here and there. And so we were still free I was a family, it was 5 of us, So tell me about the main benefits of, say, the Brazilian passport for me.
Very good, and thank you for bringing this back. Like, we're already getting to the how before the why, right? So there's many benefits of having a second nationality, and then with it getting a second passport. One would be being able to maybe travel to more countries visa-free. Second would be being able to relocate or have these other like study, work, investment, doing business benefits in other countries, like having that be more seamless. But then you also have other things you can take into account. So first, like this privileged access in the case of a pandemic or lockdowns or so. If you're a resident to a country or if you're a citizen, then that's a completely different level of access than a regular tourist, right? They can change, like they can take away your visa free travel to a country if the countries like they don't like each other anymore. So that can be taken away. But then if you're a resident, you still have the right to get in, and especially if you're a citizen, no one's going to bar you. We saw that during the pandemic. A lot of countries were closed for tourists, or they were very, they had a lot of requirements for tourists. But if you're a citizen or a resident, then you could still get it. You can still get in. And then you have the other main benefit, which is you have 2 countries that you can go to for everything you need, right? You're no longer, let's say, the sole subject of a country. So you have 2 countries that are competing for you. So just like when here in the Free Cities movement, we're talking about governments competing for you, like having, places that are competing to attract you. In this case, it also is like that in the sense that you now can go to 2 governments to ask for the things you need. So, for example, getting essential documents, right? Like getting like a certificate, getting a criminal record or so. There's countries that take months, maybe sometimes, like Russians now, to get their documents is a pain in the ass. Like they have to travel there and it takes forever. But if they have another citizenship in an easier country, then maybe you can get it in like 2 weeks. And these are essential documents for a lot of processes, not only migratory processes, but maybe for banking, for opening a business or so, you might need to show an official government document. So you're able to go to 2 places for that, and then you can also always pick and choose what makes the most sense for you. And then you also have 2 passports, so you have 2 different ways of verifying yourself. And I can give an example here. I won't name the bank account because I don't want them to close it again, but I had a bank account in an institution that I had opened with my Austrian passport. And I had a personal and a business account. The business account turns out in their terms of policy, like you couldn't actually do anything regarding offshoring and banking and residencies, and any support on that front was not in their terms of service. So when they found out like my business was doing that, they nuked the account, but not only the business account, they closed my personal account too. I was like, damn it, I actually like this personal account. I was using it a good deal. What if I tried to open again with my Brazilian passport, right? Because they banned Francisco the Austrian. Will they find out? Let's see. So I try to make the like signed it up again, showed the passport scan, everything, and then they accepted it, right? Because their unique identifiers, maybe like first name, last name, nationality, and passport number. Now it's a different nationality and passport number, so I was able to access that banking institution again. And then on the other hand, there are some institutions that maybe they're not present in Brazil and they're present in the EU. So in that sense, I can use the EU passport to have an easier banking access. So you always have two countries you can refer to. And also in the sense of, let's say, consular support, right? Like if you're abroad, if you need any help, like some countries are better connected to other countries than others. So let's say when I went to Portuguese Africa, I was in Cape Verde recently. The Brazilian embassy is a big thing there because Brazil and Cape Verde have a lot of trade relations. Austria, not so much. I think it's just a consulate that they have there. So if I need anything while I'm in Cape Verde, then, I can go to Brazil and Austria. In this case, Brazil is better. But then let's say I'm in another EU country, then maybe I will go to the Austrian embassy. So for everything, you have two countries that you can refer to, and then you can choose which one you want more. Even travel, right? Like when I'm traveling within the EU, I use my EU passport. I go through the EU control. No one bothers me. And then same thing when I'm in South America, I travel with my South American passport, and less questions asked. So I can get like the best of both worlds all the time.
I've got an unusual example. I want you to tell me what would have happened in this situation during the pandemic. Travel off. I'm not sure whether it was mandated or not, but travel was allowed for repatriation to your country of origin. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you were English, British, and you also had a Brazilian passport, would you have been able to use that as an excuse to leave Britain to be repatriated to Brazil as a native British person, but with also a second passport in Brazil?
Yes, I assume so. Because you're also a national of Brazil, so you can be repatriating to any of your two countries. Now, there's actually one thing that when you mentioned on your example is important to note here, which you said like leaving UK with the Brazilian passport. Now, that is a subject that some countries, if you're a national of them, most countries actually, if you're a national of them, then you're supposed to be traveling in them only with their passport. So like if I try to go to Brazil and present my Austrian passport instead of the Brazilian passport, I can get into trouble, because I'm only supposed to be traveling in Brazil as a Brazilian. But then what I choose to show to the other country that I'm going to, that's not the problem. So for example, I can leave Brazil with my Brazilian passport and take a flight to the US and then enter the US with my Austrian passport. And then Austria is visa-free to the US, right? You have ESTA, so I can get into the US with the Austrian passport. Like that's usually the moment when you make the switch. If you're alternating passports in travel, right? You enter the country with a given passport, you're going to leave that country with that same passport. But then when you enter the next one, that's the moment where you can decide, will I enter as a Brazilian? Will I enter as an Austrian?
It all sounds, I don't know, I know it's totally legal and stuff, but it all sounds very cloak and dagger.
I mean, it can be used for cloak and dagger purposes, right? If you want to like maybe obfuscate your travel history or things like that. But it can also be used for perfectly normal purposes. Like, for example, I can't enter this country visa-free with this passport, but I can with this one. And so I'm going to, switch the passport that I'll show to enter this one.
So you think the number one combo to go alongside a British passport might be a Brazilian passport?
Not necessarily Brazil. I think overall, it's very interesting to have a passport that is within a settlement block, like these passports that give you residency rights in more than one country. And you have one already because you have a UK passport, which gives you the right to live in Ireland if you decide, right? Yeah. You have that access to another country. Yeah. And then getting another passport that gives you access to another block, I find to be better than having access to only a single country. Of course, this is a general recommendation. If you really say I love Mexico, I want to create my life in Mexico, I just want to spend my whole time here and build my business here, and okay, perfect, Mexico can make a lot of sense. But when we're talking, I want to have a diversification here, I want to have access, I want to have the optionality, then I would recommend you look at a passport that is a part of a settlement block like this. So maybe a EU passport, maybe a Mercosur passport. And then within Mercosur, I would say the top three are Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. And
so basically you should have three passports: EU, North America and South and
2 is already much better than 1, and then the benefits are diminishing, right? So like the difference between 1 passport to 2 is enormous. The difference from 2 to 3 is good. 3 to 4, okay, you're already pushing it. Like 4 to 5, you're probably not gonna get anything extra with that one, right? Like it's diminishing benefits.
you're just showing off at that point, aren't you? Okay, Brazil, Chile, and Argentina. Chile.
So, basically, quick overview of the 3, right? Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. Brazil, I mentioned, you have Mercosur and you have CPLP. Argentina, I would put it in the list because it's the fastest, right? We talk like 2 years, or otherwise 0 years if you're married or have kids there. Chile, I would put it there because it is the strongest Latin American passport. It's the only one that you have visa-free travel to the US, that you have visa-free travel to Canada, and that it is also a member of APEC. So APEC is this community of the Asia Pacific countries, and they don't have like the relocation option, right? You're not going to be able to move to all of these countries, but they have what is called the APEC business travel card, that if you're a business traveler, like, and the definition of a business traveler varies from country to country, but in Latin America, it's usually easier. Then you can get this APEC business travel card that gives you visa-free travel to all the countries in the region, including China, for example, which is a big deal for a lot of people. So then if you have a Chile citizenship, you can get the APEC business travel card. Then you can travel to China if you're a business traveler. So, overall, very strong passport, because then you can get access to US, Canada, EU, Russia, and then indirectly China too.
What's the history of that then? Why is Chile so well connected in all those places?
It is the stablest, richest, most developed Latin American economy. Like if you take any index of anything really, like per capita income, human development index, lower corruption perception, rule of law, economic freedom index also, you can look at that. Chile's always in the top 3 for Latin America, and usually in positions 1 and 2. So, that's why they can get all these benefits. Like for example, the rejection rate for US visa is one of the criterion that the US uses for giving the visa-free travel. And Chile has a really low rejection rate, whereas let's say like Venezuela or Brazil or Colombia, which are usually have more people that want to try to move to the US illegally, then they have a higher rejection rate. So because Chile is the stablest, richest, has its house in order to the best extent that you have in Latin America, then they also get to have these privileges.
What about if I'm buying my way there? I know one way to get residency is to invest, right? Not just go and spend 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, or whatever. What are the good countries that allow me to invest and get some kind of passport quickly, I suppose?
Yeah, so there is a difference here between citizenship by investment and residency by investment, right? So citizenship would be you purchase the citizenship outright, and then you're going to have a passport in hand, usually in less than a year. That is then mostly the Caribbean countries. So you have St. Kitts, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, and St. Lucia. You have Vanuatu in the Pacific. Solomon Islands actually announced that they want to do a program like this as well. You have Turkey, you have Malta, you have Cambodia, Jordan, Egypt. So there's really not an option here in Latin America if you want to outright buy a passport. But then there's also the option of getting a residency by investment, which then is what you have in a lot of EU countries and then also in many Latin American countries, that you can get residency by investment, usually with a very low minimum presence requirement. And then after X number of years, you could try to apply for a passport. So for example, Portuguese golden visa, Greek golden visa are very popular at the moment. Cyprus golden visa is also one. In Brazil, if you purchase a property for 700,000 reais in the north and northeast, or 1 million reais in the south, southeast, and central-east region, so basically like in the current conversion, like 110K in the poorer regions and 180K in the richer regions, then you can get a residency by investment there. And so you get the residency. After 2 years, you can upgrade the temporary residency to the permanent residency if you still keep the property. And then after 4 years of permanent residency in Brazil, you could apply for the citizenship. But then So you see that it's a much longer timeline, right? So if you're purchasing it outright, you can get it in under a year, but there's only a certain set of countries that even allow this. And then there's not a single Mercosur country that has a citizenship by investment now. There were some talks that I had listened that maybe Argentina wants to create a residency or a citizenship by investment, but I haven't seen any concrete details or proposals on that end, just like that the idea was being floated around. Let's see. Like, it would be very interesting if they actually had that. I think it could be a very competitive program. But currently, if you want to purchase it outright and have it in under a year, it's going to be that subset of countries.
So really, it comes down to you spending time there, right? In most of these places, the fastest way to get a passport is to actually reside in that place. On the whole, is that fair to say?
Fastest would be to buy. Then if you want something from a country that you can't buy it from, then usually you have the route of spending time there, of marrying someone from that country, in your case not an option, having a kid in that country. So that is actually something that we're helping our clients do also, birth tourism. And that one can be quite interesting because, for example, in Brazil, usually it would be 2 years of temporary residency, then 4 years of permanent residency. But if you have a child in Brazil, like you go there, give birth, there's some excellent hospitals in São Paulo, in Rio, in Florianopolis, capital of my state. Excellent hospitals, you can give birth there relatively cheaply at a private hospital. The kid is immediately Brazilian, and then you as the parent can apply for permanent residency on day one due to family reunification. And as a parent, then you only need 1 year living in Brazil to apply for citizenship. So we cut that 6-year time frame into a 1 year time frame for you to apply, just because you gave birth there. And then you also left this gift to your child, and then you can apply in under a year. And then Argentina, again, you can apply in 0 years, like you give birth, and then you as a parent just apply for residency and then apply for citizenship. And Chile is usually a 5-year timeline. That one is cut to 2 years if you give birth. So
even
birth
if
tourism
you're
is a
tourists,
real one.
Even if you're two tourists, me and my wife, she'd have to go there pretty pregnant.
So here's let's think of a real planning here, right? In Brazil and Argentina, you can actually do it as a complete tourist. In Chile, technically you should have the residency there before, but they have a residence permit for pregnant women, like the humanitarian permit, so you can get that also. Then in terms of like how pregnant the wife is, this is not a problem. Right, if the child is born under a tourist visa, they're still going to be Brazilian, they're still going to be Argentinian. Now, you may have a restriction from the airline for a very pregnant woman to travel, or there may be issues on that end. So really, like, check on the airline requirements. Usually, if you can come earlier, like not like, in 2 weeks in 1 week she's going to give birth. Not ideal. Maybe come like a month to even 3 months earlier if possible. I know it's not possible for everyone, but it helps organize it and make it easier and avoid any possible stresses. But yeah, it's definitely possible. My friend Mikhail Thorup was also talking at the conference. He did it like 3 times. He did it in Chile, he did it in Brazil, he did it in the UAE, I think in UAE. And he's already planning like a 4th child that he wants to give birth to in another country. So,
I'm missing a trick here. I've already had all my kids, but that's an interesting one. You could even argue that, if you were comfortably off enough, you could say, right, for the second half of the pregnancy, we're going to go live in Argentina.
Yeah, spend half a year.
They have a good life, or even for a few months, and then have a lovely private hospital and give birth, and you get all that advantage as well.
Yes,
but stuff like that.
Assuming you don't have this option, right, then one thing one can also look at, and this one we do a lot for both Brazilians and Americans because they usually have it, is citizenship by descent, right? So looking at your family tree and seeing if your blood may be able to give you a second passport. Of course, how easy this will depend on your lineage. Some citizenships are only up to the father, for example, like France. Some are up to the grandfather, like Portugal or Ireland. And some don't even have a generational cap, like Italy, like Germany and like Poland. Of course, they have other criteria that may exclude you from the right, but it's possible even if it's a great-great-grandfather. that was from that country, right? So like if you're able to map your family tree and you find out, oh wait, I'm actually 164th Italian, like I have an Italian great grandpa. If he was actually Italian, like after the unification of Italy, then you could actually get a citizenship from that, a very good EU citizenship at that, and then you can have a diversification of, okay, UK, EU already gives you access to a lot of things.
How do you prove that though?
Usually we're going to get a direct lineage to that person. So birth certificates, marriage certificates, and death certificates of everyone from you up to that person. So that's a lot of work. That takes some time also to collect. We actually have partners in these countries who can help with the document collection over there. So like, hitting up an old church, hitting up the old town halls of like these small Italian towns, and like, going after the birth certificates. It's something that takes some time and it's some work. But again, by the citizenships by descent, you don't actually have to live in the country. And it's not going to cost that much, right? Most citizenship by investment, by descent programs, you can do all of it for like between, let's say, 2 to 6K, most cases. All right, it's not going to be more than that. So compare that to, putting 6 figures into a Caribbean citizenship. My man, you're putting like 4 figures into a European citizenship. There's people that pay $1 million total to have like Maltese citizenship by investment, to have a EU passport. If you can get it for 4 figures, it's a bit of a no-brainer. You just have to go after it. And of course, you have to be able to qualify. Not always you can qualify.
You mentioned earlier you're spending most of your time in Colombia. Why is that? What's Colombia got to offer?
I'm mostly dividing my time between Colombia and Brazil, right? I find Colombia to be the country that is closest to Brazil in terms of its lifestyle and quality of life and what it has to offer. It also has some of the same problems, but then these are problems that I'm able to navigate, that I'm relatively comfortable with, right? Because like I know my way around, I know how you should behave in these countries. So, but overall, I find both to be, some of the best quality of life countries in the world. Of course, if you're earning a local wage, then maybe that's not as comfortable as someone who's like not earning so much. But if you have a remote income, and I do, then you can have a fantastic quality of life in both Colombia and Brazil. There's a reason why all the Brazilian football stars like Adriano and Ronaldinho and so on, they make their money in Europe, but when they finish playing, they all come back to Brazil, right? They don't get away from the beach lifestyle. So I find both countries to be for people to be very friendly, for the people are very welcoming. They're overall very happy, even with all their troubles. There are cultures that encourage dance. Like I really like dancing, and I like to get to put these skills to use. There's a lot of nature. I'm the kind of person who likes to work a lot during the week, and then on the weekend like go to a waterfall or go to a hike, go do some, like maybe just even go to the beach really. And that's something that I can do in both of these countries, right? So they offer, for me personally, one of my favorite lifestyles. But of course, lifestyle preferences vary a lot from individual to individual.
What would your number one city be in the world then? All things considered.
That's very hard to answer. It's very hard to give like just a single answer. Because it's for different purposes again, right? Like best city to visit, best city to retire. Like there's
standard of living. Just what you get for all things considered. You've got, take it for granted, you've got a foreign income, you've got a dollar income. Where's the place that you would go? I mean, you're probably already there, where you find high quality living, reasonably priced culture, whatever, in a city format. Not. I was going to ask you also, where's the nicest place that isn't a city as well, like more out in the countryside. But do city first.
I would say that Rio de Janeiro is up there as one of my top favorite cities in the world. Of course, there are safety issues in Rio that can be lowered a lot if you're wanting in one of the rich areas, like in the South Zone or in the West Zone, Baja, Ipanema, Leblon, Gavia. There's some neighborhoods that have a much better safety situation. And then you have the historical side of the city, right, from Brazilian Empire days. You have beach, you have a lot of nature in the surroundings. You still have a very lively culture. You have basically all of the events and concerts and conferences in general, things that are going on in Brazil. They're always in São Paulo, Rio, right? They always, like, Brazil tour means they come to São Paulo, go to Rio, and then go up to Europe again. So you can find a lot of that there. But then again, depends also on the time of your life, right? Like maybe when I'm, let's say, when I'm 40, will I like Rio that much? Will I not want a place that is a bit calmer, like not so much noise? Or maybe to raise kids, right? Currently, I don't care so much about the safety situation because, I'm an adult and I can take care of myself. But, what when I have small kids? Will I want them to be around some of the things there, or would I want a more quiet place, maybe a smaller mid-sized city? So it's very hard to give a general. For example, within Europe, I would say Vienna, Budapest, and Belgrade are some of my, you have great quality of life. Especially, I'd say Budapest has like the right mix between good infrastructure, great culture, great architecture, good quality of life, good outdoor activities. I would put that in one of my favorite cities in the world.
What about as a family then? Best spots in the world for families? Settling down.
I think southern Brazil has some really good options. So Santa Catarina, the state I'm from, has kind of a collection of mid-sized cities like Florianópolis, Balneário Camboriú, Blumenau, Joinville, where it's quite safe. There's a good level of safety. You have like a good environment, and you can have a good quality of life, good cost of living, all of that. I would say Argentina can come into that as well. I think Argentina is very, like, the level of safety there is very good. The level of infrastructure there and connectivity is very good. The culture is really nice. Like I'm a big fan of meat culture, for example. If I'm having kids, I want them to eat a lot of animal protein and grow into 2 meter tall. And let's say another one, I think Panama can be a good option as well, with the level of development and connectivity, and there's an active homeschooling community there. There's a place that you can get a lot of like the best of both worlds, let's say. And within Europe, then I wouldn't go so much, let's say, to Eastern Europe, and then maybe something more like even Spain and the Mediterranean. I think these are easier languages to learn, especially if you're putting a kid through school, and you want them to integrate more and not have to be necessarily on an international school. Then maybe something with an easier language.
I see you've not mentioned the UK yet. Is it really that bad? And like what's the UK got going for it? Really? Like, I live there. I wouldn't say I'm not happy to live there, but I do live there nevertheless. We have our ancestors and our family and everyone there. So
I've actually lived in Edinburgh for a month and a half. I really liked it. I find the quality of life to like the city to be great, but I think it is a country that currently is not in a good path, right? There is an increasing amount of censorship. There's increasing attacks on freedom. The taxes are high. The cost of living is high. And the climate is also not exactly the best. So I would say in the current circumstances, it's relatively hard to justify UK as a place you move to if you don't have any ties there, right? If you have your ties there, if you have your family, if you have your friends, there are very strong reasons that might make one want to be there. And of course, also maybe job market and study opportunities. You still have some of the most prestigious universities in the world, for example. It makes sense one would go there for that. But for the regular expat who is looking to move, I think you could find For example, a country that has a similar quality of life and level of development, but a much better tax situation currently is Ireland, right next door, right? The UK is closing its non-dom regime. Ireland still has it. So if you have foreign incomes and you don't bring it to Ireland, you're not going to pay any tax on that. So you can have, like, how big of a difference is it really in terms of quality of life from Dublin to, another mid-sized UK city? In one side, the freedoms are not as bad as in the UK, and the tax side is not so bad. So like for those islands, we're working with more people that are moving towards Ireland, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure I could persuade my wife to move that way. But final question: have you got any predictions for the sort of short-term future, mid-term future for places which are either emerging or places you think that might be going the wrong way, that are currently well liked?
I think there are two countries which are currently not in a good path and that will get to a good path soon, which are Chile and Colombia. They're currently ruled by a leftist government that has tried to raise taxes and regulations and like impoverished the country, really, like went bad on the economic indicators, but both are quite unpopular. I think that both countries are very likely to flip in the next election and go back to the other trajectory. And then these are two countries that I really like and I think can do a lot of things. So I'm relatively like cautiously optimistic about the two. Let's see. Within Western Europe, I really don't see much hope, let's say, for Portugal, Spain and Italy. I think their cultures are not really conducive to doing a big change in their politics, and like I don't see there being enough of a movement for reform that would be good enough, right? Like I see there's a lot of hatred, but that is partially misdirected in these countries. Let's say like in Barcelona, where they're blaming the prices of housing, like, oh yeah, these damn tourists, right? These damn people using Airbnb, maybe partially because of that, but that's not really like the main problem. Like if you look at Portugal, that's one of the countries that builds the least in all of the EU, and then like, oh yeah, like sure, you're gonna blame the 100 Americans who are getting a golden visa and moving to that neighborhood, and like they're the ones to blame for the prices. So like I think those are countries that are going to continue on a down path. Germany, I think I see a lot of unrest in the UK. It's a bit different than Portugal. I think that there was a big chance that might turn the other way. But Portugal in specific, like they're like taking out they're working against the golden visa. They took out the non-habitual resident regime. They took out their tax exemption on crypto. They're talking about taking out the current like non-habitual resident 2.0. The Madeira special economic zone regime is also set to expire in 2-3 years. So I'm bearish on Portugal. I think people that are considering moving there right now should maybe wait a few months to see how it's going to be with their tax regime. And I think these are some I'm positive and negative about. I'm big on Eastern Europe, by the way. I do think there's a lot of potential for some of the countries there. I think the Baltics are doing overall a great job, right? Estonia surpassed Portugal in GDP per capita I think 2 years ago, and they're doing a lot of good work over there also.
Wow, that's a lot of information. Thanks, man. Thank you indeed for that. I feel like you're giving away all your business secrets there, so I appreciate that you're so candid with information. I'm sure there's a lot of people there listening to this just taking notes as you were speaking, but thanks for coming in. Great. Good luck with your work. Obviously, you seem like you don't need any luck at all. Everything's going swimmingly. And thanks for coming in. Anyway, it's been great talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tim.